Hello and welcome back to Deconstructed. I'm your host Sam Animo Mackenzie, and with me, as always, HLTV's favourite bitch boy, Parry Piero Pitchards. So, we're just after the HLTV Awards. Harry's had I'm sure a pleasant trip to a lovely city somewhere in the world. Harry, how was your time at the awards, mate? I've heard you had great food.
Yeah, I mean, busy, very busy. A little bit too busy to actually see the nice parts. So you know,
the nice parts. Is that parts plural?
Yeah, I'm sure there's nice parts. We got
Okay.
because one of my housemates' girlfriends is Serbian, so we got recommended loads of places. We just didn't have time to go anywhere, so we ended up with terrible like shopping centre food and Mackies and whatever. But you know, if we went back, I'm sure Peter as well. He was upset when I told him at the award show that there wasn't. When there was, he said loads of restaurants, so it's not their fault. It's not their fault.
Yeah.
We just were in like a little bit across the river, not a lot of good food. It was great.
Maybe they should be like Poland, because Polish Mackies is fucking nuts. It's so good. So good.
See you in Katowice.
Anyway. No, I'm not going to that one, and I would go just for the Mackies and Masala House, but there we go. Anyway, let's talk about our topic for today, which is the top 20 and kind of how it works. You know, a few people had issues with placements of certain people. You know, maybe you'll say if you think some people should have been higher or lower. I don't know whether you're allowed to say that, but we'll have some fun with it. I mean, I already know these things, so I can definitely have fun with it. You'll have fun trying to dodge it. Rosario was number 1, as to be expected, and further down the list, it in many people's eyes gets a bit shambolic. So I feel like the
strong word.
Well, some people had
Harsh
Torsey like 15th and Electronic 12th and Elige 13th. So to those people, it's shambolic, or maybe just their opinions, and maybe some graphs are shambolic. But I don't know who that would be. So anyway, I thought the best place for us to start was, seeing as you're heavily involved with it now because you like bribed your way into HLTV or some shit. You can talk about the criteria of how it works, like how it's made, and like kind of the important things you look at, the event weightings, and if there's any stats that deep down at HLTV, a good stat like impact rating, is complete and utter dog shit, and you just throw it out the window from the get-go. So floor's yours, mate.
Yeah, what an intro, as always. You're so good at what you do. Yeah, for criteria, I mean, the number one thing with everyone's predictions is that you can immediately tell the number one resource is to click on stats and click on 2023 and then look at year-long ratings and be like, okay, there's no way this guy's going to be too far off this, because that's all they look at, and that's fine. You're allowed to look at that, but it's not how we do it. It's not been how we've done it for a very long time. And when I say we, it's me, Striker, and Peter. So the game will restart in 1 second. He's still here, as much as some people have been saying, like, oh, it's so different since he left. No, he's still the main person. The methodology has just changed a little bit. And the main important thing is EVP awards, because EVP awards, we basically go through events in much more detail than any single stat is going to tell us for the year. So when we do an EVP award for an event, we go map by map and be like, okay, well, these frags actually important, blah, 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 blah. We look at the ratings in more detail, and you can tell a little bit more if someone's inflating or whatever. So it's actually, we literally go map by map for each player at each event. And at the end of the event, they get given like a score out of 10, and above 5 is an EVP. But a lot of players got a lot of 4s and 3s this year that actually mattered a lot in terms of compared to other players. And a lot of people had very high EVPs, like an 8 or a 9 EVP. Well, not a 9, probably a 7 or an 8 EVP that were actually better than some MVPs. So like, Jabbi Spring Final,
Just
Rain,
out of interest
Rain
here,
Sydney.
is an
Their MVPs
MVP,
were worse than...
Is an MVP a 10? Like, is that always a 10, or can
No.
an MVP...
A 10 is...
Okay.
So MVP is just the highest rated points-wise of the event.
Right.
So like Rain and Jabbi, I think, got 7s or 8s at Spring Final in Sydney, like weakest MVPs of the year. Hunter at Cato as well, I think maybe a 7 or an 8. Probably an 8 for him because his finals go so good. But so that's how it works. And then when you compare it, so like at the end of the year, like Mbalazi didn't have an MVP, but his IM Cologne was like, we could have given him the MVP. And even though we didn't, he still got the same like score as Nico for that event. So when you're comparing to other people, his peak for the year, even though it wasn't an MVP, it was still a lot better than everyone else's because he's basically an MVP at the top 3 event. So that actually matters a lot. So that's the main way we do it. And then when you get points for that event, you then look at the events themselves and give them a percentage based on the major. So how important is an event based on the major? And most of the big events are pretty similar. Obviously, Cologne, Katowice are higher, and people are already disagreeing about that. And I think mainly it's because it was so long ago. Like, I think anytime you make a list like this, you have to kind of acknowledge that Cologne and Katowice are up there with a major. Like, they just have to be. They have to be valued higher than Dallas and Sydney. Like, they have all the best teams. They've got the prestige. Like, they've got the history. And like Pro League as well. Like Pro League, there's a case to be made for Pro League to be valued highly, but we just didn't because like there's so many bad teams there you farm rating against in the groups. It's not an arena. There's no prestige. Like these are the things we think about.
What about World Final? How's World Final?
See, World Finals...
Because people think World Final is prestigious.
Okay.
Some people do. I fucking don't. I don't understand any argument that places World Final, and I've seen many people make this argument. I don't understand any argument that places World Final above Spring or Fall Final. Like, what's the difference? Like 500k in cash? Like, okay, cool. I'm sure it means a lot more to the players to win it, but the tournament's the exact same. Normally, you've got a fucking worse team at one of them. Like, I don't really get that one personally.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I mean,
I've been there. The crowd is shit. May as well be in a studio in Malta.
It's supposed to be the best 8 teams of the year because of the way they invite people is better than the way they invite people to Fall and Spring Final. Like that's why it's better. As in terms of when we look at it in terms of like the ranking of the teams that are there and blah blah blah. But because you're inviting the winners of Pro League, winners of Major, winners of Cologne Cato, like it's gonna be a decent event. Like it's quite hard for it not to be. And then it's based on blast points, which are a bit scuffed. Like they miss out some weird events, include some weird events. But still, you're going to get a better team list than Fall and Spring Final. It's just that when I think of Blast, at least it's Fall Final. Like that's the prestigious one. But to be honest, none of them are that prestigious for me. Like, which is kind of a shame because Blast are so good. Like they need that prestigious 16 at least team event. I hope they do that at least 2025. They're probably not this year. But yeah, so our other issue was because there's no second major, we only had 3 like really elite events. So it was Cologne Cato Major. They're the elite events. And because that's so small, it was kind of like you kind of need a few more. So we did, in the end, bring, I think, Sydney first CS2 Land World Final, pretty good team list, even though it was also scuffed. Like it was just kind of worked out that it was...
5 teams were dead.
Yeah, and I did say this, but it's kind of still compared to the other events, quite strong. And then, what was the last elite event? We did put it in our article. Hang on. It was...
Gamers 8 had a decent team list.
Gamers 8 had a really, really strong teams list. Like a really, really good teams list. And then also Gamers 8, it wasn't going to affect averages too much if you just like went out in the first round because you played 3 maps, so it doesn't really matter. So it only matters for the teams that go really deep. And if you look at like semi-finals, quarterfinals onwards, like that event is stacked. So yeah, those were the 6 elite events. But honestly, the bottom elite events were not too dissimilar from the big events. It was the super elite events were significantly higher, and that was kind of something I pushed for quite a lot and something I got, and there were consequences of that we'll get to. But yeah, we valued Cologne Cato in a major like very highly compared to the other events. We did do that, and Heroic will thank us for that. Other teams won't. But yeah, it was. I think it was. I will back that decision. I think they are a level above Prestige. I think teams aim to peak there, and they should be valued higher. Like a top 4 there just means more. It just does. I'm sorry, it just does. I don't really care about like a Dallas or a Sydney even. Like they just are a tier below in everyone's mind, and in the top 20, like we should consider that, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I think the aiming to peak somewhere argument is the greatest. Like,
it's the argument against Pro League, for instance.
Like I'm not entirely sure that aiming to peak there is a real fucking thing. I think it's more of a mental thing. I mean, like there'll certainly be things like
teams do say stuff like that though. Like that does come up.
Yeah, no, there'll be things put into practice, of course, and like certain boot camp timings, certain strats that you're like, oh, we'll leave that one, like whatever, that's fine. But I'm still a bit on the fence as to how much of it is just a mental thing, as well as like, oh, if we keep telling ourselves we'll peak at this point, we'll peak at that point. But I guess the last point about criteria then is, are there any like individual stats that you do look at more, don't look at more? Because like I brought it up earlier, but impact rating is a bit shit.
I mean, but we have impact rating is something that is not really like, it's a simplified thing, right? Like the one you see on site is simplified. Like when we look at it, we don't look at the main number very much, but we do look at entries and multi kills, right? Like multi kills is something we look at, but I don't think none of them are like valued higher than others. I think we do value, say, KPR and ADR higher than survival and KAST. Like we do that. Like it did come up with Frozen and a few other players that, like, even though they're factored the same into rating, we do value them slightly differently. And people have told me that, oh, they're undermining their own rating system, and it's like, it's an old rating system. Like we're allowed to say that kills are more important than deaths. Like that is something we're allowed to do. Like output does matter more. I think it's silly not to think that. But in terms of overall stats, like there's a few things we always check. So we always check saving. We have access to saving. We check kills and losses compared to kills and wins, because even though that can be a bit dodgy, especially because we don't have economy data.
Rounds.
Round wins. Like kills and round wins really matter. Because if we see someone like Xertion, 1.06 like kills per round win, and then bad in round losses, like he has a really bad stats in round losses, so it's you build the picture of a player from that, right? But there are these players that are kind of really good overall stats, and then in the round wins they're kind of like the 4th, 3rd best on their team, and it's like, how much impact are you having? Like it might be that they're not eco-fragging as much or whatever, but it at least tells us something. So there are some players that suits, like someone like Rain. That really helps him because he's so much of an impact player, and that is kind of what we look for as impact players. Like I think maybe people think that we overrate like AWPers and stuff, but honestly, like a lot of the stuff we look at is actually the other way, like kind of rewarding aggressive players more than people think. Like passive players do get flagged in terms of if they're inflating stats from the things we don't see as valuable. Like we do look at that. Like BlameF had the 2nd highest saving out of all the players that had enough maps to be considered. Like it was Jame and then BlameF, and then I think Frozen was like 4th or something. So like we do look at that, and I know you can say it's not their fault, they've got a bad team and whatever, but when so much of their rating comes from survival, you have to consider that. You have to. And I think if we ever redo rating, like obviously that's going to be looked at. When it was made, saving wasn't as big a thing. So that is something that has to be thought about. And then other stats, like mainly it is like multi-kills, round wins, saving, the overall stats, but we don't really look at them that much apart from tiebreakers. And the huge one is, and this is where we do rely on rating more, is we look at big match rating, which we changed this year to make it more strict in terms of what was considered a big match, because last year, like all of Pro League playoffs was like, it was the top half of events. So we had we had seeding matches from Cologne and Katowice in there because it was top 8 teams playing against each other. And even though it wasn't elimination, we used to consider that a big match. And this year we didn't. So it was mainly arena matches. It was prestigious matches. Like, it was more kind of what you think of when you think of a big match. So that was this year as well that changed. And big match rating is huge. Like, it's massive. Like, we can talk about Rops's big match rating. That's a huge part of why he was third with, like, year-long stats that weren't that good. He was like 1.25 in big matches. Like, that's just, like, what can you do? And someone like Nertz was punished for having a low big match rating, which mainly came from Cologne, so it's a little bit harsh, but it is significantly lower. And someone like Stavn as well, it looks much better before you look at big match rating. And then also, like, rating versus opposition, because, like, we have rating versus top 5 versus top 10 versus top 20. Like, on the website, when you click on the top 20 filter on the stats page, it doesn't actually show you versus top 20. It's like top 20 versus top 20 teams for some weird coding reason. But we have access to all the versus top 5 versus top 10. And if you see a drop off significantly there, like, we flag it. We flag that. So yeah, it's like they're the main ones, but honestly, it's more. We only really look at overall year-long stats once it's close between people, like or like if it's significantly different. It's not as big as people might assume of, like, the year-long stats, because people play at such different levels of events against such different levels of teams that you kind of need to go more into depth with it, unless it's a huge difference. Like, people are rewarded for really good year-long stats. Like, Kscerato is in the top 20 and played, like, one playoff game all year that mattered. So it's a balance. Like, we consider everything, which makes it hard to say what we value most. Like, we're looking at so many things. Like, these are long days. Like, my December, there's a reason there's been no articles from me in a while. There's a reason there's been no INSITE content. It's because this top 20 takes ages. And when people are like, you forgot to look at this, or you forgot about this player, it's like, no, I promise. Like, this list is the best we could do based on the information we currently have. And I think economy is a huge gap. I think it'd be very interesting to see what changes if we had economy data, but there's nothing we can do about that at the moment. Like, so yeah, that's the overall criteria. Is primarily it's the awards, and the awards we look at in a lot of detail, and they're the most important thing for sure. And if they're at an important event, then it's way higher. Like, an MVP of, I don't know, like Espo is about as good as an EVP at, like, a major, probably. Like, it's on that level of prioritization for sure.
Okay, so I feel like the next logical place to move to is maybe some of the issues that I have with it, and the first one, which I'm honestly not sure how you solve, because I think it's where I hit a kind of like a logic barrier with it conceptually. And I think you're gonna get pissy with this, but Thorin tweeted something that kind of alluded to, like, the same kind of thing earlier, because he tweeted about Nico and where he'd place Nico in, like, past years, and I think he said something about
the 2016 one, right?
A team in that, yeah, right. And I think, you know, you can. I was talking to someone about it earlier, and you can apply the same thing to when someone like Virgil van Dijk is high up in the Ballon d'Or, and people bring up the fucking goals and assists bullshit, and it's like, I don't particularly like the idea of purely individual based awards, because you see it with someone like Device this year. Like, Device has stats that most other years he's in the top 5, maybe top 3. I don't know, right? Like, Device has incredible stats, but because he's on a team that for 9 of the 10 months they would have played in were complete and utter dog shit, he's not even a top 10 player. And I think that's where, unfortunately, and you know the stats better than I do, like, you know how many fucking teams in the top 5 or top 10 he played in, like, matches against them he played versus how many fucking Stavn played. Like, you know that. I don't know that.
I mean, Stavn actually played less.
Well, yeah, that's why I said Stavn. But I think, and this has always been one of my stumbling blocks with the HLTV top 20, is that it's always presented as this individualistic thing. And I don't think it's a bad idea to necessarily have individualistic things. That's not what I'm saying. But my issue is just that I couldn't do what you do because I think too much in the sense that, well, Counter-Strike is a team game, football is a team game. Like, you can't value these individuals like that because, you know, sometimes like Device, like where would Astralis be without Device? Okay, well, he was just a better player than it seems then because he couldn't drag them along by himself. And I know Blame F was good, but come on, we know there's a bit of a gulf between those two. I mean, even if ratings,
it is a top-heavy team, right?
There's a huge gulf between those two players, and there always will be. So that's one of my issues. My other issue, though, and I personally think this has become my bigger issue, is the idea of roles. And you know, you're a pretty big role guy, and I'm sure you'd have had this discussion at some point, and there might have been things that were said to you as a way of it making sense. You know, we've definitely not spoken about this, but so you've got someone like Magisk, right, who's quite low down on the top 20. I can't remember where is he, 18th?
17.
Okay, so he's quite low down, and I'm also going to cite eye test and vibes within what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Of course I am, because it's Counter-Strike. It's Counter-Strike. But so I'll do the eye test and vibes bit first. I know Magisk hasn't played for a few months or whatever, but while he was on Vitality, the amount of times where I watched him save a half, save a map, like do something that, Zywin might be in top of the scoreboard and Spinks might have had a couple kills more than him a few times, but it was Magisk that got the key fucking play that was controlling the key area of the map. Like, even a game where they shouldn't have been threatened and maybe weren't really threatened, like Vertigo ITB in the major quarterfinals, Magisk fucking dominated.
Yeah, and it's the type of thing that doesn't show up on end of map stats a lot of the time.
And
it's the thing.
And he does things like that all the time because he's just that good. But because of roles, you know you can't push him higher because it's potentially harder to justify because of a stats thing, and it does become an eye test thing. But then you go further along, and you have these players. You have Frozen, you have Blame F, you have their survive stats, you have their kills in lost round stats, and you can also take it to the aggressive players and having their kills in one round stats, which, you know, it should be valuable, like kills in one rounds, like win you the game, whatever. But the problem is if you're, for me at least, if you're not going to look at the roles for someone like Magisk and not just bump him on the basis of, oh, we understand Counter-Strike enough to understand why this is more fucking impressive. Because honestly, like, you can bring up the reason in a second if you choose to. Fuck the lowest common denominator of people. I don't fucking care. If we're gonna do this fucking thing, do it fucking properly. Do it for the people who fucking understand Counter-Strike. And I'll also make an argument for Xantaros being in there at some point, if I get to it, if I remember. Because personally, I think he probably should be. Because we know he's good enough against tier 1.
But anyway, big one event, of course.
That's not the point. The point is, if you're not going to do it for something like someone like Magisk, whose stats don't show, so therefore he can't be pushed higher, even though he was incredible, then personally, you're looking up stats now, bastard.
No, that's just opening his article.
Okay. Fair enough. Then, personally for me, something like fucking, like, times Frozen or Blame F have survived, like, or Xershin getting kills in one rounds, like, that one's kind of, like, see, this is the thing, this is where it gets difficult. At this point, you are looking at, without even intending to, like, or maybe intending to, you are looking at Xerxen in a role-based manner. Because a lot of the times, with how he plays and how aggressive players play, if they have success in these rounds because of their playstyle, their team is more likely to win. When you then have a player like Frozen or BlameF, they play more passive. They are meant to be the kind of safety net, the not an anchor, but the person who sweeps in at the end and secures the round. The amount of times I've seen one of those two players save in a 1v3 or a 1v2, well, 1v2 is a bit egregious, well, fair enough, but like a 1v3, like I always see it happen a lot with Frozen, where Frozen, like Mouse have hit B on Inferno, Frozen's gone through A, he's going to wrap, he's planted for CT, like he will win the round if it gets down to a 1v1. Maybe he wins it if it gets down to a 1v2, but the two dickheads on site have fucking died without getting a kill. Well, what's he meant to do then? And that to me is where we start getting into kind of hypocritical areas, because you're refusing to look at one person's roles because you have to potentially go into the grounds of eye test and vibes for the stats site, but for other roles it's far easier. Like that to me is kind of nonsense. Yeah, you can go.
I can go.
Okay, so make me sound like a knob.
Magisk, obviously, my eye test doesn't say he's the 17th best player in the world this year. That goes without saying.
Give us a number. No, number.
I'm not going to give you a number.
No, give me a number.
He's been my favourite player.
You don't get to speak until number.
I've not done an eye test list because it'll only mess with my head even more and make me upset. But I've not done an eye test list.
Would he be top 10?
Because eye test is flawed and based off of vibes.
Would he be top 10?
He'd be top 3, mate. He'd be top 3. But anyway.
That's outrageous. Okay, carry on.
I mean, that's all. Half joking. But the thing with Magisk, right, is I think you have got a really good point, which is that Magisk is really, really hard to measure, and that's in terms of the holes in his game, and I mean, probably because there aren't any, but the strengths as well, because he's such a mid-round impact type of player, right? And you think about how many of his kills come in situations where he shouldn't get a kill. Like nearly all of them. Like he is got that hard support role T side where he has to injure all the fucking time. CT side, horrible positions. And honestly, we can measure it a little bit, because you can look at the average player's CT rating on a position, and then you look at Magisk and it's like 0.10 higher, and you're like, he's quite good, isn't he? He's quite good, isn't he? But in terms of the top 20 for that, it's really difficult to incorporate that. And I'd want to, like, I'll put my cards on the table, I'd want to. I think if Magisk is 17, there's a hole in our stats. That's my honest opinion, is that if he's low compared to my eye test of how good he was this year, like probably a top 10, then what we're looking at is the stats we have don't show impact as well as we think they do. And that is a real shame, but at the end of the day, we can only go off what we have. And at the moment, I think Economy Day would love someone like Magisk. I've never seen that kid get an eco frag in his life, not even once. So it's like he's one of those players who is clearly amazing, but our impact rating says he's 1.06 because he doesn't get loads of openers, like above average openers probably. Multi kills not that high, even though you think of him as like a multi-kill specialist. Like that's only when they go to his site, and they don't go to his site every time. And if they don't go to his site, he's in the horrible retakes, and he's the one going first for Zywoo or Spinks or whatever, right? So I think it is a hole in our stats, but it's supposed to be a statistical objective list, and we can't change our entire methodology because my eye test says that Magisk is better than 17. We can't do that. We have to go off
but it probably applies to more players though, right? Like Magisk is just the best example because he is so... Oh, he's just Magisk, and he like...
Yeah, but even like Litify rating, like one of its stated goals is to basically overrate support players to justify, because they're like, oh, they've got a harder role, so we'll just overrate everything that a support player does that normal players don't do as much, right? And the issue with that is that you look at Litify rating and the players it rewards is not Magisk. It's not Magisk. It's like Nath and Frozen and BlameF. It's not the people you think it's going to be. It's the people who when they die, they get traded, and they get loads of trade kills, success rate, and blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of survival as well. Like, I think survival matters more for late fire rating than it does for HLTV, because if you die under late fire rating, it's like your team's win probability has just gone down loads. So if you're a late round player and you only die when it's like a 3v3, it doesn't shift the win probability as much as Magisk dying in a 5v5 or a 4v4. It actually it's really hard to balance, and I think late fire have got it a little bit too tilted towards surviving. Like, even more, like HLTV, for say what you want about it, we probably overrate aggressive players, and late fire probably overrates passive players. And that's just the honest truth of it. Like, I think that's... But for Magisk, he was just... Every stat we looked at, he's just above average. Like, everything. Like, he's like 5% above average, but in everything, because he's just that consistent and that good at everything, right? But you look at his, like, year-end stats, and it's like 1-1-2 rating in his roles is insane. Like, it's insane. It should be compared differently, but how can we do that? And honestly, maybe it's just my lifelong mission to find a way to be able to do that objectively and fairly, because it is really hard to look at a list and see Magisk 17th. Like, this was my least favourite part of the top 20, because I was trying so hard to make an argument within our criteria for Magisk to be higher, and there just isn't one. Like, you look at all our traditional ways to measure impact to a team, and Magisk is behind Spinks and Zyro on everything, because it's Spinks and Zyro, right? Like, it's not his fault. He's just behind them on everything. And when you look at map by map, he's not getting many player of the maps, because even though he has these really huge rounds and moments that change games, at the end of a map, it doesn't always come across. Like, you'd have to watch every single game and place an eye test level amount of impact on the round that changed momentum. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be a rating system that values the momentum that a Magisk multi-kill gives you, and like how underwhelming it is for a team to execute something. Like, there's never going to be that.
Expected rounds.
There's never going to be that.
It's expected rounds, bruv.
Maybe it is, but yeah, that's going to be like some AI bollocks, right? It's going to be some nuts thing that we can't do yet.
You, Beardo, we can make it. We'll get Ethan in as well. He's smart. He knows, like, maths and shit. We'll make expected rounds. Easy.
Well, I think for someone like Magisk, you need that. You need that level of statistical ability to be able to match an eye test, because on the tools we have available, like, he just couldn't go higher. Like, I tried so hard. I literally threw every fucking thing in the spreadsheet at the other two in the committee, and it's just not even hearing myself. I just couldn't do it. Like I couldn't make an argument based on what we valued this year, and ultimately that just means it's the right decision based on consistency with past years and everything else. Like, we do have to take the nameplates off for top 20, because my eyes are telling me that Magisk being next to cadiaN on the list is insane. Like, my eyes will always tell me that, but we can't.
And, Jabbi being higher than him despite being dog shit for half the year.
So Magisk suffered from not that many high peaks in terms of events. Like I can think of peaks. I can think of moments where he changed tournaments, but if you look at the event as a whole, it's like he's like constantly between a 3 and a 6 in terms of our score out of 10 for an event. He's always 3 to 6. And you're comparing him against players like Jabbi, okay? So the reason Jabbi's above him is because Jabbi had an MVP. He had like a good MVP, like a higher peak than Magisk in his MVP. And he also had Katowice, where he was like the second best player of the tournament. So when you're comparing Jabbi to Magisk and being consistent with we prioritize peaks over floor, and that is probably another thing to talk about. Like, that's a thing that people do disagree with, and it's fine to disagree with that. But we do prioritize peaks over floors, because we see that is like tournament winning impact. Like, Jabbi is the reason Heroic win the tournament. Magisk is like the third piece in a really good team. And it's, how do you look at that? But in the direct head-to-head Jabbi-Magisk, like, Jabbi had to be higher because he was more directly impactful on stuff that we can measure, not my opinion, on stuff that we can measure, to his team winning tournaments and getting to finals and whatever, because we can measure what Jabbi was doing in those tournaments. And in my opinion, we can't measure what Magisk was doing in his. That's what I think. And it hurt me. It hurt me. I've loved Magisk for so many years, but it's just, when you do this list, you just can't let that get into you. You can't, because otherwise Device would be 1 and Magisk 2. Like, you can't let me do that. Okay, so
so I just can't. it's with how HLTV look at it, with how they aim to do it. It is right to take the nameplates off, but like we both said, for how we view the game, at least for how we think about the game, and I think for how a lot of people understand the game. Like I was talking to Flames earlier, did a little interview with him for Blast, and I asked him, does he have any goals for this year? Like maybe he'd like to get onto the top 20, because maybe he would have been there if he'd have been on Vitality from the start of the year.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, that would be cool. It would be a nice goal for myself, but realistically with my roles, like I'll always struggle to get there. But if Zywa and Spinks are in the top 5 again, then I know I've done my roles. And I thought that was a really cool response.
It's a good way to put it, for sure.
But again, that's one of them where, like, with just how we look at the game, I'm not sure it's good enough for me personally. And I think as HLTV look at it, nameplates off, numbers based, it's always going to be that way. I won't argue with a lot of the methodology. At that point, I will ignore things like roles, because like you said, it's impossible. But I would maybe think about the impact of teams more, because I have watched
and the other thing
guys play with Bob.
Yeah, and Megas also suffered because he didn't play the last 2 events of the year, right? So
the
rest of his team are getting like more EVP awards, like everything, like, and it does affect Simple and Shiro later down the line too. Like when you skip events, like you just, like, sample size is such a huge thing, and Mega still had a crazy good sample size. Like, I'm not saying that stopped him. I'm just saying that I think he probably would have got 2 more EVPs, because I think Vitality still win those tournaments. So if he gets 2 more EVPs, how high would he be, right? So
I would like to say again though, Harry, Device did play with Borup.
Yeah, and we'll get to Device.
He also
it's going to be a long episode, but yeah.
Also Glaive. He played with Glaive as well.
Yes.
I just want to put that out there. Just want to establish that. Maybe looking at teams is something that should be done. But anyway, yeah, this is going to be a fucking long episode at this rate. So let's move on, because I feel like we've kind of tackled my personal gripes with it. Like, I understand it's just a personal thing, and it's how I'd look at it, and my list would be different.
It was my hardest moment, I guess, getting that low.
But I'm glad you agree with it, and hopefully one day we make expected rounds, because that would be really funny. And it would take so much work that I'm pretty sure it would be the thing that pushed me over the edge, and then I'd get to escape this cruel world.
Yeah,
anyway,
we'll move on.
Anyway, let's talk about the list itself, and we'll try and move through it maybe slightly quickly. And let's start then with that first kind of group of players, maybe down to Hunter, maybe.
Yeah, that's where we looked at it. That was the
way to go. Okay,
so it's like Hunter to Exile, which was like 26th. That was one group. That was one group of players we looked at to sort, because there was a really big gap between Hunter and the people above him. And Hunter was not at the top of the list when we originally sorted it. Like, that was something that came after we looked in detail. Like, it was probably like a blame F or someone around there at first.
So you got Hunter, who would be a good place to start. There's a couple of names I wanna bring up. We've kind of gone through Jabbi, so we don't need to talk about him. But Hunter being where he is, we've spoke about Magisk, and I think the other 2 that are worth really talking about are Kscerato and I just said his name, cadiaN. I think those 3 are worth talking about, but before that, it's probably worth mentioning why people like Torzi, Electronic, and Elige do not make the list.
Because they just didn't play enough, really.
It's just recency bias.
Yeah,
it's just a massive case of recency bias. If you had him in your top 20 list, it's really fucking stupid.
People love it. So Electronic actually had quite a good start to the year, but his middle of the year was dog shit, and just didn't end the year on... Like, he did have a lot of EVPs, actually, but just struggled compared to people above him. Elige, so bad for most of the year. Like I love Elige. Like CS2, he's like top 10 player easily, but he's getting like -1s in the first half of the year, and like it's quite hard to get a -1.
I mean, this dude was literally losing games to shit teams at a major, and for 7 rounds he wouldn't open his mouth once. And I'm not saying anyone else in the team opened their mouths because they didn't.
Doing it allegedly.
No, I don't have to say allegedly. I was in the fucking room.
You were standing there.
I was
none of the team was
standing in the
talking.
room.
I'm not blaming Elige for that game.
No, I'm not blaming Elige either, but this is like this is the level he was playing at, as was most people on the team at that point. I think Naf had his worst game ever at that major, right?
Yeah, it was a terrible environment. But
was
the
it
point
Cologne?
is,
Was that major? It was one of them.
Elige couldn't get in. Like, it was just sample size was too low, and complexity were actually only good for like one event. Like, in terms of pushing him into contention, like he has that Sydney where he was like as good as the MVP, but also 4th in the MVP race, which is really weird because FaZe had 3 people so equal, and he was clearly below them. So they all had like similar. It was like Broky was really close, Rock was really close, Rain got the MVP, and Elige was 4th. So Elige's peaked, even though it was like sick. Like, you're going to need more than that. Torji had an MVP at Pro League, but again, it was a really close MVP. Like, Frozen could have got it. Even like Jimmy could have nearly got it. Simple was pretty close if he had a better final. Like, it was one of those MVPs where it wasn't as dominant as people might think.
Let's not forget Torzi, diabolical under Dexter. But he just
actually his year-long stats were much better than I thought they were. Like, compared to my eye test, I think he actually had better stats, to be honest. I think he was actually very close.
I test
because number 20 is Twist, and Twist actually had a pretty bad year. Like, Twist got in because his overall stats were so good and his sample size was so good that he's always going to get a few awards. But yeah, Twist was not a guaranteed 20. Torji Twist was quite close, which sucks if Torji has like a top 20 bonus in his contracts. Like, I know some players have those. so I hope he's not one of them.
I'm just going to say, I know Torzi was shit though. And maybe I'm going a bit further back than the start of 2023 because I know the amount of times I had to suffer watching Dexter with an AWP in his hands. And they'd be in the 4v5.
And this is another classic eye test of yours that we just can't.
No. You ask any of the boys, we finish this episode, you get in the fucking INSITE Discord, you're like, how many times did Dexter AWP? All the fucking time, bruv. All the fucking time. He'd send Torzi in, Torzi would die, he'd pick up the AWP. It's like, shut the fuck up, go home. Why are you here? It's almost like certain people would question your leadership skills. I won't name certain people, but
okay, great.
Certain people would know.
Kscerato is 19, but he's probably as high as you can go with as bad a sample size and as bad a team as Kscerato had, because his stats are still wicked. Like, as much as people think of him as having a slump, he's still so wicked. Like, he's so good. But he played, I think, 3 big matches all year. Three big maps in the entire year, which is like even worse than Device and Blame. I think Device and Blame might have had 6.
Were they elite or?
No, that didn't count. I think Kscerato had 1 playoff. It might have been Rio. I think Rio quarters or something like that.
Yeah.
So Kscerato had a 1.30 big match rating this year, but he just played like 1 game. so basically Kscerato had flawless stats. The only flaws were sample size, and if his team's not going that deep, it's hard to get an EVP, because the way EVPs are sort of decided, if you go map by map, it's kind of like, okay, so you carry a group stage game, like maybe you're on a 2 or you're on a 2, like a 3 if it's like insane. You carry another group stage game, you probably up to a 4. But then good quarters, 6, good semis, 8, great final, 10. Like, a 10 is flawless every game, basically. But Kscerato was getting 4s when Fury were losing 4 maps, and Kscerato was getting 4s. Like, this guy couldn't do much more. And again, this is where maybe it is a flaw of the list, because it is supposed to be individual, at least somewhat. But it's individual with a reliance on achievements and big match play. And if Kscerato is going to play 3 games all year, like, I don't know, man. Like, he just didn't play enough. He just didn't play enough against good teams and in big matches and in high prestige situations. But every time he did, he was insane. He's another one that is so hard to value, someone like Kscerato versus the people above him who have crazy high sample sizes in super elite events. They're there in like Cologne, Kato, and major playoffs. Like, their sample sizes are just, how do you compare Kscerato farming groups and losses and like cadiaN getting EVPs at the major and
this is the thing.
Katowice. It's so hard.
You've got like, you've got these people like Device who have a low sample size, but it's easier. Huh?
But yeah, it's just amazing. Like Device is like a super Kscerato in this year.
It's slightly easier to argue for them to be higher. But then you have someone like Kscerato where it's like the level of the team was just so bad that it's hard not to be able to justify it. Like I can do it in my head with someone like Device. I can't do it as much with Kscerato, even if it's only like 3 maps versus 6 maps or whatever, because it is still just like, I just know how fucking bad your team was all year, and I know that, like, sure, his ratings against decent teams was really good, like, fair enough. But I also know, like, if I look at his event history, there is going to be a slight degree of fucking inflation by, like, a win against Greyhound and then 2 subsequent losses against...
Yep. He plays all the elimination games, like every tournament.
And that's where it gets difficult. However, I do still think, when you've got someone that flawless, when he comes up against those good opponents, he still plays well. He's just got a band of fucking idiots behind him. Like, do we really think he was that far down?
So do you know what his problem was? Okay, so he fucked up all the play-ins. Like, he didn't play Cologne, didn't play Katowice, like didn't qualify online to anything.
Did he fuck it up?
Sometimes. I'm looking at it now. Sometimes. Actually, sometimes. Paris, like the showdowns and whatever. Like
Paris, he was bad.
Paris bad. Like you can't have.
He was 0.32.
Cologne play-in, he was really bad, by the way.
Spring Showdown 1.25. Cologne play. Okay. Cologne and Paris were the only 2 he was bad at, and a European Open qualifier for 6.
But he's played 6.
In a European.
He's played 6 big events for the year. Megas played like 10. Like Twist played like 14.
Playing 1.33, by the way.
Yeah. And do you want to check who they lost to? Because
it's going to be a joke. It's
because do you want to know who they lost to? Because they've lost to Big and then IHC.
That was it, wasn't it? It was the one they lost to IHC.
So Kscerato's gone 23-12.
Okay,
but this is exactly what we're talking about. With someone like Kscerato and Frozen for the first half of the year, this happens all the time. 1.33 rating. Oh, he's fucking sick. Click it. Okay, and he's still really good, obviously, but it's massively inflated. He's died 12 times in a 16-10 loss to IHC.
This is the thing.
Like, where are your kills coming, man? Are you going to win any rounds or like?
But this is where you've got to take into account. This is where you've got to take into account, though, and this is why I have this problem with it. It's a fucking team game. It's a fucking team game. His job in the team is to, sweep things up, whatever, that kind of shit. So, and it's the same with Frozen. If your team you can't 1v4 every fucking round. You can't 1v5 every fucking round. Some players don't get one in their fucking career. Like, this is what we're talking about, and it's the exact same thing, because Fury are still shit, could happen this year. The exact same thing could happen this year. However, we also know that Kscerato, there was interest from Liquid for him, and he's an idiot for not moving, and he's more of an idiot because I don't know if there ever actually was interest in him. He's more of an idiot than Tabson for not ditching Big. Straight up, Fury is much more of a sandbag to Kscerato than Big was to Tabson.
Yeah.
But so he could go to Liquid. He could have gone to Liquid. At 2024, he could have played multiple playoffs. He could have had the exact same ratings in all these tournaments. We're talking like, what, 1.2 average, some shit like that? I don't know. It's got
about that for the year.
Something similar. Yeah, so 1.2 average. But he's gone further, and suddenly he's a top 10 player. But if you look at it, even with the low sample size, he's probably bare minimum 1.15 if he plays against some better teams more. And I think that's where maybe you've got to And I know it becomes difficult, and then it becomes whataboutism, because it's also the same whataboutism you get with someone like eye testing majors being like,
Okay, here's a
but what if
question.
he didn't get that multi-kill? But
Here's a question.
maybe that's how
Where
you
would
look
Donk
at
be on your
people more
list?
fairly.
2023, where's Donk?
I don't
Because-
count online events, mate. So,
But you're saying we shouldn't value sample size as much, because essentially the reason team performance is rewarded is because we look at sample size so much. It's because we look at it and we're like, okay, he played like half the maps, so there's like a ceiling on how far he can go compared to these players who are in playoffs every event. There's just a ceiling on it.
I know,
there just
but
has to be a ceiling on it.
I think
so Donk plays one LAN, is like the best player in the world. That's like a 1.4 rating or something.
But I think there's also the added
He's already
context
like eye test top
there's
10
also
player
the
in the
added
world probably.
context of like Donk plays that one LAN in December. How many LANs did Kscerato play over the year?
6 big events.
Yeah, okay, like
That's
this
nothing.
is what I'm... Well, yeah, but it's not one. It's not one LAN.
Yeah, obviously. Like, it's an extreme example, but you get my point. My point is that sample size is a very hard thing to value, and it's also very hard for us to consider in terms of a player, but ultimately, like, it just has to hold you back. Like, it's the same for anything. Like, the small sample size in any, like, statistical thing, and this is a statistical thing, sample size is the number one most important thing when you're looking at something.
Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe it shouldn't
But
be
that's
so
you based on...
statistical. No, it's because stats are shit and they ruin everything. Look at Sorry, I was about to rant about football stats again then.
No, because you don't get to see fucking 18 long shots from your centre back a game.
Yeah.
Fucking XG, ruined the game. There's no long shots anymore. It's like,
XG has ruined the game. It has absolutely ruined the game. Yes, it has. Data analysts, people like you rotten bastard.
Yeah. Well, okay, we're on number 19 and we're like 45 minutes in. So this is great.
Well, we're not gonna go in that in depth. So we spoke about Kscerato. We spoke about Hunter.
What we should do is talk about
Hunter
hosting. My turn. We should talk about cadiaN and Hunter together, because it's the same.
Talk about those two together.
It's the same argument for all of them. It's we chose to prioritize peak over floor because we always have.
Do you think that's an issue? Or do you think floor should be valued more? Whether it like peak over floor makes sense, but do you think floor should be valued more?
I think peak over floor is a justifier. You can make an argument to defend peak over floor.
No, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that's wrong, but do you think you don't look at floor enough?
It would have pushed Magus higher for sure, but it also would have pushed. It also would have pushed Blame F and Frozen and Stavn higher, and maybe I don't agree with those three, right? So it works both ways. But ultimately, Hunter, Jabbi, and cadiaN had really strong EVPs and an MVP for Hunter at big event, like at the Super Elite events. And you look at them at Super Elite events, and then you look at the person below them. Okay, so Hunter's 13 feels a bit too high based on like an eye test and his overall stats and whatever. But you look below him, it's Nerds, who like had the worst big match rating in the top 20, didn't have awards at elite events, like had a quite bad elite rating actually overall. So you can see why in the head-to-head you're like, okay, Hunter has to be above Nerds based on the stuff we value for every other player, because we are doing peaks over floor. And then Jabbi over Blame F is the same thing. cadiaN over Kscerato is the same thing. It's the same thing.
You know the major? Which stages do you look at? Do you look at it all as one?
No.
Challengers,
Legend stage
Legends.
onwards.
Okay.
The Challenger stage is looked at the same as like a play-in, so it's in the overall year-end stats, but when we look at EVPs for players, like the Challenger stage basically doesn't exist. And
would that change if it was like one after a really fucked RMR, so you had like fucking half the best teams in the world were all in Challengers?
I mean, you're always going to have a bad ranking average at a Challenger stage of a major because it's global invites. Like, there's just always going to be a top-heavy field ranking-wise, and because also the majors reward these like open qualified teams so much, you just don't have a chance to get ranking points because they're not in the part of the leagues. Like, it's always going to look worse than it probably is. Like a challenger stage of a major is always going to be hard to include. I think maybe we should look at it more like someone like Nerds. Like Snappy actually just said this to me. If Nerds doesn't have such a sick RMR, Ents might not be at the major. And they had a bad major, but for the record. But if they weren't at the major at all, how differently do we look at their year? Because it does play a factor in BlameF and Device's years that they weren't at the major. Whereas Nerds was like the best player at the RMR or whatever, other than like Nipple, lol. So that should factor in for Nerds, but obviously for us, it doesn't really, because we're not handing out MVPs and EVPs for a fucking qualifier, even though a 2-2 game at the RMR is the most important match of the year. It's like the fucking championship playoff level of money which you're getting from this. Like, it is the most important match of the year. But ultimately, that's not something we do, so whatever. So you end up with Hunter, Jabbi, and cadiaN quite high because they've done really well at super elite events. And generally, people will think we overrated G2 for their year, but we all agree that Cologne and Katowice are like the two of the three biggest events of the year. We all agree that. We all agree that they're like full-on Counter-Strike heritage. Everyone wants to win this. Everyone says in their top 20 interviews, oh, next year it'd be nice to win one of Cologne, Katowice, or the major. They're put on that level by players, by everyone during the events. Everyone puts them on that level. And then the event finishes and it's top 20 time, and it's like, why is this player this high, this high, this high? And it's like, it should be. It should be. These players should be rewarded for peaking at the biggest events of the year. Like, maybe they're too high because we should punish them for their low floor more, but we do punish them for their low floor because you look at the players above them, and often that's one of the reasons that they are punished. It's more that Jabbi's able to leapfrog BlameF because he's got these peaks at really big events, but he can't pass Nerds because his floor's worse and Nerds' peaks were slightly better, right? It's that kind of thing of we're valuing both at the same time. And their peak did get them quite high, but also 13 to 12 is a huge gap, and 13 to 14 is a tiny gap. So when you look at it at the end of the year, like, you think Frozen and Hunter are close, they're not at all. Like, there's miles between them. Hunter's closer to Twists than he is to Frozen. It's one of those. It's that mental. And the same is true for Frozen to Sunpayus, and then Sunpayus to Sphinx. Like, there's huge gaps there. Like, these players are in groups that isn't apparent at the end of the year. So yeah, like the cadiaN one is not what I loved. Like when we were looking at it, we were like, oh fuck, cadiaN's like actually going to be in the top 20 because he had an EVP at the major and at Katowice. He was very good at the major and at Katowice. Like, he probably should be. He probably should be. And people call him an eco-fragger. We don't have economy data. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. He's in the top 20. Because of those peaks. Like, we value those peaks. He has to be in the top 20. And your eye test is not going to tell you cadiaN was a better player this year than Kscerato. It's never going to do that. But that's not the point of the list. That's not the point of the list. The point of the list is to show who had the best years and the best peaks at the best times. And arguably cadiaN did do better than Kscerato in that way. And he did enough to be in the top 20. So I think that's the main issue people had with that section of the list, is the Hunter, Jabbi, cadiaN, and BlameF being very low, considering he had like the fourth highest rating. But BlameF has measurable inflation in his numbers, and unlike Device, the reason Device has a big gap is because Device had that really high peak at Cologne, which BlameF didn't have. And because Device had that peak at Cologne, you could compare Device to Hunter and be like, okay, they actually had similar super elite peaks. Like, Device's Cologne was that good that it jumps him over people, even though his sample size still is rubbish. Whereas BlameF's sample size was rubbish, and he didn't even get an EVP at Cologne. Like, we looked at it in detail, he didn't get an EVP. His EVPs were at CAC and at Pro League. He had a really, really good Pro League, and that was big pot-wise 16, but it's more like comparable to Kscerato for the rest of the year. It's like a lot of group stage farming and stuff. So he ended up that low. So yeah, that was that part of the list. But yeah, it does look weird, but these players are so close. Like, 13 to 26 is so hard. Like, you could random name generate it and probably justify that group of players. But ultimately, that was what we came to, and based on pretty bad information that we're going off, I think it's fine. Like, looking at it now, it's fine. I genuinely think that is all defensible. It's all defendable, other than Magisk, because. But again, it is defendable under our criteria and under our methodology. Like, it is. That's where he ended up.
Fuck your methodology. So I guess we've spoke about a lot of the next group, but the one I wanted to hone in on was Stavn, because I know the argument would be, oh, but he gets a lot of falls at events, like, fine, whatever. But
yeah, he did. Got fucking loads, like every event.
Yeah. But you know how I feel about Stavn. I hope that in a year's time I'm saying something completely different, and I hope they make
role
a
change,
and he gets over whatever the fuck happens to him the minute he sees more than 250 people in front of him. Guessing that's the amount of people at a Pro League. I don't know. You might also be shit at Pro League. I don't know. You left that out of your article, I think. But
I did, yeah. Mine was Arena Games.
Yeah. So, but either way, I, knowing what Stavn is like as a player, I also that's the other one that for me I just find ridiculous. Especially also missing a few events at the end of the year. Because if that hurt other people, that surely must have hurt him. Therefore, he could have been higher, which to me is outrageous.
Okay, so yeah, it does hurt him. Obviously, it hurts him, but the people above him are Shearer and Simple, so it doesn't, compared to them, it doesn't hurt him. But yeah,
But if he'd have been at the last couple of events and got 2 more EVPs, would he have leapfrogged them? Do you think?
I mean, maybe. So the thing with Stavn is, we actually coined a phrase when we were looking at Stavn, and it's like decider downer, because the amount of tournaments you look at, and this guy is like clear fucking EVP, and then you get to the deciding series, the deciding map, and it's like, okay, we knock him from a 5 to a 4 for that map, and it's like every tournament, right? And like at Paris, he was amazing. Like, genuinely look at his Paris. Like, I know how your brain works. You think of Stavn at Paris, and you remember Mirage, where he got like 5 kills. Because that's how my brain worked too. That's all I remember from Stavn at Paris, is that terrible last map. I'm like, no way this guy has done anything good at this major. Fucking amazing before that.
We're going to look at his rating now.
Amazing before that map. Like, it's genuinely insane how much that map ingrains in your memory. But yeah, he got an EVP at the major because he was really good at the major. Apart from that last map, and that last map, the whole team were bad. Right?
He's 1.19.
1.19 at the major.
How did he be so bad on Mirage? How did he do that?
And he had like a 0.36 rating on map 3 against Game Legion, and ends the major on 1.2. So like, this is what we're talking about with Stavn. It's like, his consistency is insane. And yes, I think Heroic had like the weakest opposition of everyone in the top 20 because they were seeded like first every event, right? Like they're literally not playing. They played fewer top 5 teams than Device and Blame F Heroic, which is like, how? But then you think about it and you're like, oh, of course they do. Like, Astralis are like coming into these events with shit seeds because they're bad, and Device is farming top 5 teams while this team lose, and then Stavn is just sailing through every group stage by winning every game and getting decent ratings. And it's like, you can't dock Stavn for just not. They just won in every group stage match. But yeah, so when we get to the group of Stavn over Broky, I think Stavn was always going to be over Broky. Broky had so many bad tournaments that Stavn's floor was always going to help in that direct comparison. The thing that we did look at was Stavn and Broky versus Device and Frozen as kind of a grouping, because Device and Frozen had similar things going on where they were like, their raw stats were insane, like so good. And then their rewards were kind of a little bit dodgy compared to their raw stats. Like, Device was above Frozen because he had that Cologne where, Frozen didn't have a tournament like Device's Cologne. And Pro League was really good, but it wasn't as good as Device's Cologne, ultimately, I don't think. And Device's raw stats were better as well. So that was Frozen's strength, was his raw stats, and Device had better. The decision that is a little bit dodgy is we put Stavn and Broky above Device and Frozen. And I think you can flip those round. And I think maybe I would have flipped them around. In hindsight, maybe. I think I probably would have done like Device 9, Frozen 10, Stavn 11, Broky 12. I think that is probably more akin to most people's like eye test. But again, we were coming back to the same thing of what we normally value. And with what we normally value, Stavn did struggle against top 5 and top 10 teams. His average did decline noticeably. He did have bad big matches. Broky had loads of events where he was just terrible. Like, there are flaws in these guys where you could justify Device and Frozen above, but Device being 11th and Nico being 11th in 2016 is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence because how much can you let a player with that bad a sample size and 6 big matches? Like, you're playing 6 big matches. Can you be 9th?
Yeah.
You think yeah? I maybe think probably yeah. Compared
I
to
think the big thing for me with Device is the comparison in terms of opposition with Stavn. That's why I'd do it personally.
Yeah, and you know, we did talk this through. Like, we do kind of talk through the case for either decision. Like, we don't just say like, oh, he's above him, and then not talk about it. Like, we do look at both.
Yeah, you talk about it, but then when you just end up throwing darts at a dartboard while blindfolded, like you come up with this shit.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do, mate. Yeah. So yeah, I think because Frozen's the really controversial one. That's the one everyone hates, but I don't think he was ever going to be higher than 10th. Like, when you look at his events in detail, like, there was just
Probably shouldn't be.
There wasn't as high peaks as people seem to think, and his year-long rating was insane, obviously. Frozen below Stavn does hurt my brain. It does hurt my eye test, but kind of had to be done, I think. Like, I think I could have argued for Device and Frozen above Stavn and Broky, and maybe I did. I can't even remember at this point. Like, my brain is frazzled. Like, maybe I did.
At that point, you probably wanted to enjoy Christmas.
Yeah, it was probably like Christmas Day or something. But
they're calling you up. Like,
yeah.
Can we have a meeting?
Like, I'm looking at it
please?
now.
Like, no, we actually celebrate on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah,
boys.
we're not Christmas Eve boys. Like, yeah, looking at it now, like, Device 9, Frozen 10, Stavn 11, Broky 12. I think that's more reflective of the year that I watched with my eyes. I think it is. But ultimately, we made the decision to not do that because, like, I think Frozen was barely even in contention. Like, we looked at Frozen v Broky and Frozen v Stavn, and Frozen actually just lost, like, clearly based on what we normally value. Like, he just did. Device probably was closer, but also just sample was just bad. Like, it was just so hard to put him above and be consistent with the rest of the list. So that's how that group was settled. And maybe we should talk more about Frozen and why he wasn't higher, but it's the same shit. I
feel like we know this now. So
yeah, it's the same as the rest of the list.
Let's talk about the next group very quickly. The three AWPers, who coincidentally their names all begin with S. Little thing I noticed and was like, oh, that's kind of nice. But yeah, let's talk about them because obviously, Simple, Shiro, they missed a couple of events. I feel like Shiro missed more, but I might be lying.
No.
There. Did he not?
I mean, Shiro maybe missed more because he didn't play as many in this first half of the year. But they were similar overall. Simple quit after Pro League. Shiro quit after Sydney. I thought that was when
Shiro went as well.
Shiro went after Sydney. He had a stinker on CS2 and it was just like, I'm not doing this. So
okay.
But yeah, I mean, this is where the top 20 actually kind of sorted itself out once we got to the top 8. Like, the hard decisions were pretty much done, to be honest. Like it was very clear to us, at least, that Sunpayus, with the Dallas MVP and like a few other like really good events, like his Cologne was amazing. Like, he really carried ends, because when you think of Cologne in terms of how we were talking about nerds, then you think if Sunpayus getting a really strong EVP, it's like, okay, so Sunpayus is going up and nerds is going down. He was so good all event.
Absolutely insane.
So he has the EVP there. So Sunpayus had better peaks than Simple and Shiro, and he was okay. So Sunpayus is above those two, and then Simple v Shiro was really close, but actually weirdly Simple had a better sample size. He had more rewards. Like, it was really close, but Simple just had a better case, so that was quite easy as well. But I think the top 8 was pretty set in this order for like most of the time we were looking at it. Like nothing we saw really changed our mind on the top 8. And then above Sunpayus is Spinks, and that's the bottom of the top 5. Spinks probably could be higher in some people's lists in terms of being the second best player in the best team or whatever. But m0NESY had Cologne, which was a better event than any of Spinks's this year. m0NESY's Cologne was that much better. And actually just had better awards than Spinks as well, I think. So m0NESY Spinks was a head-to-head that we did. m0NESY Rops was a head-to-head we did, but Rops had a 1.25 big match rating this year. And that's just, like, what are you going to do? He also had, like, is it 3 MVPs? And 2 of them were at medium events, but like, it still counts.
He was MVP and Thunderpick and CSC.
Pro League, Thunderpick and CSC. So yeah, CSC and Thunderpick actually didn't count that much. So, like, when we were talking about the points earlier, like, they're on very low percentages in terms of like actually
Well,
affecting
fun
the
to
top
pick
20.
shouldn't count at all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but we gave the MVP out, so we kind of had to, but it wasn't on a high ranking, like it wasn't on a high percentage. Then in terms of EVPs, then yeah, it was like, so he had an EVP at Paris, Sydney, and World Final. That's 3 elite events that he was all really, really good at. So that helps a lot as well. So Rops was just clear of Manassi. And he had the peak at Pro League as well that people forget because it was ages ago. So Rops was pretty far ahead of Manassi actually in the end. The Rops and Nico, we did look at briefly, but Nico was just, his raw numbers are nuts. Like it's very hard to knock Nico's year actually. You can, because it's not the strongest number 2 we've ever had at all. Like I think his striker even said at the award show, like the gap between Zyro and Nico is as big as any that we've ever had, because normally like even like Simples 2021, which is probably the best number 1 ever, or like even Simples 2018. But 2018, like Simple, Nico, Device in 2018, like all of them were better than Nico this year, for me at least. Like Nico was really good this year, but for a number 2, actually kind of lower than previous years. Like normally it's Simple and Zyro, like Simple, Zyro, Device, bang, 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 like close to each other, right? But Zyro had a really, really strong year, like maybe just below Simples 2021, but not miles off actually. He only had 1 event where he didn't get an EVP, and it was Sydney, and it was like not even that bad. Like they just bombed out because 2 of their players, like country, just got invaded, and Magus was quitting the team, and it was just clearly a cluster. And they've had a bad first event on CST without much practice. And every other event, he was super like crazy good. So that's that easy, right? It's that easy to just top 8 was the quickest meeting. Like it was that much easier. And I think it doesn't surprise me that most people are annoyed about below that, right? Yeah, so two of their people, what are you doing talking about, honestly? But so that was where it became easy, was the top 8.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's going to argue with
yeah, the tetchy ones are further
the
down.
positionings of those people. I think, people forget. I don't know if Shiro actually dropped off stats wise compared to other years, but obviously Simple did. Like Simple's the big one, but people forget, and it's kind of the same like with Device. It's like even if these players drop off, it's like their floor is so fucking high, and they're dropping off from such a fucking high level. It's like,
Yeah,
like what? Like, okay, you've dropped off from being the 3rd best player in the world to the 10th best player in the world. Like, how outrageous! Like, you're still incredible, and that's the thing where probably actually like Simple might be the most unfairly treated player ever, because
even
in this
by
last year,
by himself.
Yeah, but in this last year, it's just been Simple's wash, Simple's this, Simple's that. Get fucked. Like, he's still the 7th best player in the world, and I know he's.
Yeah, and do you know what?
I respect him for saying the whole "if it's not number 1, it doesn't matter" thing. Like, yeah, more power to you, mate. Like, that's how everyone should view it. But if he's the 7th best player in the world, he's the 7th fucking best player in the world. He's still gonna kick the shit out of most teams he ever plays.
Yeah, and another thing with Simple is, I think recency bias did come into it as well, because his end of the year wasn't as good as his starts of the year. Well, not end of the year. He was like middle 3rd because he just quit. But he got EVPs at the first 3 events of the year. Like, people forget that. Like, first 3 events of the year, he was still kind of the 2022 Simple that was...
What were the first 3? Cato, Pro League, Rio?
Cato, Pro League, Rio were his first 3 events, and he got an EVP at all of them. So it's like, people forget that, and I think even he forgot that, because I did his interview, and he was like very down on himself on his year, and it's because he's holding himself to high standards, obviously. Like, he should be held to those high standards. But when we're doing a top 20, we're not saying, oh, Simple's fucking washed, he's so much worse than last year, he should be 15th. We're looking at him compared to regular human beings, and compared to regular human beings, he's still the 7th best in the world, easily.
Yeah. And that, it might be a hard thing for people to accept, this being Simple's level, because they're used to seeing God. I don't know, but
yeah, he's on the second half of his career, but
if he's
still really
this
good.
is his level, he's still like insane. Like it's not a thing people should worry about. So now that we've gone through it, I'd actually no, I would like to ask one question. Is there any years where Zywu wouldn't have been number one? 2018 maybe? 21 maybe?
His 2018 is probably better than Simple's 2018 because Vitality was so good. Like he just had so many really high peaks. Like he was the only one who got a 10 this year, and I think he got a few.
Okay.
I think 2021 would have been really difficult because Simple probably got a. I wasn't there. I wasn't at HLTV then, so I don't know. But I imagine Simple got a 9 or a 10 at like every LAN he attended. They just didn't attend that many LANs. Like it's hard to. No, like 4. To be fair, they weren't like proper LANs. They weren't like arena LANs, but they were.
Cologne
LANs.
was the hotel one, wasn't it?
Yeah, but all the best teams were there, and that Cologne was higher prestige than you'd think it was looking back, because at the time it was the first LAN for like 2 years, right? It was like Simple's 2021 is it ridiculous, and considering how good they were at every tournament that they could possibly attend, I think that's probably still the peak of any player I'll ever see, is Simple at the back end of 2021 when we got back to LAN. I think that was better than Zywo's year, but compared to like a normal year, I don't know. Like I think Simple's 2018 is still probably better for me personally because of the people he was playing against. Like this is prime Astralis era, and he's still like getting MVPs every tournament. So like, it's different to Vitality being the best team and Zywo being the best player. He has the supporting cast where Simple didn't. Simple getting number one is more like if Zywo got number one in 2022 or 2021, where his team was a bit bad. And I do think Zywo he's definitely closing in on Simple for me. I think if it wasn't online, he'd already be like very close. But because it was online for his 2021, I mean 2020 was actually the closest number one that we've ever had. I think like it was literally like the hardest number one decision we've ever had. But yeah, this year he was clearly the best player in the world, like pretty much the entire way through. Like Simple had a good start, like not like a simple start though. Like Zywo was still better than him, very early doors, and didn't let slip at all. So maybe it's one of the best years ever, but I still think like my eye test says that 2017 and 2018 and those years of Simple were just, they were different. They were different level. Zywo makes it look a bit too easy, right?
2017, just to let you know.
No, I know Simple wasn't number one. I'm just saying with my eyes that Simple was ridiculous in a terrible team.
Yeah, he's played.
And he did have bad games in that year.
Stinky Navi teams.
And he did play not like when I shouldn't be mentioning Simple's 2017. Like it obviously was just worse, but that's the era of Simple that I'm thinking of in terms of like. So like, would you say that Navi team was better or worse than Device and Blame F's team this year? Because this is pre-electronic, a lot of it. Navi pre-electronic, like. He was number 7 that year, I think. Number 7 in like basically Astralis, but instead of Blame F, you have who was it, like Seized?
I can't. The 19 team was terrible. Even with electronic, it was really bad.
Yeah, it was Edward, Zeus, Flamey, electronic, and Simple. But 2017, I don't know. I'm gonna look.
I feel like.
He was number 8 that year, okay.
I feel like Navi made more playoffs in that year than Device did this year.
It was when they had Guardian still, 2017.
Didn't they also win an event in 17? Maybe not with Simple.
They won New York in 2016. That might be what you're thinking of.
Oh, is it 16 they won New York?
2017, they might have won that Stars.
No, I thought it was 17.
They only won DreamHack Open Winter. Last event of the year they won.
I thought it was 2017 they won New York.
They did make a lot of playoffs though, you're right. They did make a lot of playoffs.
Yeah.
But like Simple had a 1.24 rating in this team, and Flamey had 112. Guardian 107. And then Edward and Zeus, I don't need to tell you. Edward, Zeus and Seized, I don't need to tell you what ratings they had, but
I mean, to be fair, 2019 they made a lot more playoffs than I thought they did. They just also did terrible at a couple of events.
Yeah, like but yeah, in terms of overall, like forever, I don't think Zyro's 2022 was the best year ever, but I think in 3 years he will have had a year that's that good. I think that's like, I think Snappy said it in an interview like a day ago or two. He actually thinks I was like one of the most underrated players, just because people underestimate how bad the old Vitality teams were, and they probably are not giving him his flowers as much as we should. And this is like, he is every single stat you could possibly think of. He was the best. I think I'm looking at, like, if you do depth per round but remove saving, and this is supposed to be one of his like flaws, right? Like, he's supposed to die more than like the betas or whatever. You look at that and you remove saving, he's second only to Jame. Only Jame survives more like if you remove saving than Zyron this year. Like, that's not a strength of his, and he's like the second best in the world. So yeah, he's peerless. He's completely peerless. I really hope Simple or even Device, if Astralis are good, which we're skeptical on because of roles, not because of the individuals.
You do have Stavn, but carry on.
Someone like Nico hopefully finds his groove in CS2. Someone like Dunk hopefully can be the kind of the Nico of CS2 and actually challenge all these AWPers. Like, I think that's possible. I hope Zoe gets a challenger. I think CS would be better if he had a challenger, but at the moment it looks like he's going to walk number one for a good few years, honestly, because I think Simple is in the second half of his career. I'd be surprised if he came back. So yeah, Zoe number one, and
so to wrap it, soon to be. So to wrap it up, then, to go back to some of the issues we've gone over, the ones we agree on, and the ones we necessarily don't. Other than obviously expected rounds, because that will be the GOAT stat when it is made. I know I said expected goals is bad, but expected rounds isn't. I promise you. Different games.
Already kind of exists, but yeah.
AI round probability can go suck a dick like anything with AI.
And what do you think expected rounds is going to be? That's the same thing.
Just better, mate. Just better. And it'll also involve me and you, so therefore my ego makes it go higher. But okay.
Give us the keys to Leafy rating. It'll be different, I promise.
So those issues. Is there, as a person who is very heavily involved with the HLTV Top 20, is there a way that you see to do it better? Do you think it can be done?
I mean, yes, because like everything I've said, we're building it off the information we have, and our information is not perfect. I think if we do get a new rating, it will be based on, it will definitely have economy in it. I don't know when that could possibly be. Like, I know the reason we haven't done that so far is because it is so finicky. Like, including economy is really hard to do because we're getting stats. It's not like Leafy, who can download your demo and just bish bash bosh. Like, if we did that for the amount of games we cover, like, it's not feasible. And that's another reason why we haven't done the AI shit yet as well. Like, it's just not really feasible. But there is scope for an upgrade to 2.0, and we are doing so much of our decision making, at least intrinsically, based off 2.0. Because when we're looking at EVPs, we're going map by map, and we have like an advanced scoreboard, but it's still an advanced scoreboard. Like, it's got the kills and the damage and the openers and whatever, but it still has the rating 2.0 at the end, and that's still the best tool that we currently have when we're doing these many games. So yes, it can be better if we make rating better. And I'm not going to pretend that rating is flawless, because like, it was made in 2016. It was a different game. There were different things to be worried about then. It's still really good. I think it actually does its job pretty fucking well. I think people overestimate the whole like MR12. Everyone thinks it's just shit now. Like, that's just not really true. It was always designed to be average over an event, not a map. But yeah, the way we improve the top 20 is by changing the rating, I think, and having access to stats that we don't currently have that might reward a player like Magus more. Like maybe there's a stat where you have like not a tiebreaker. What do I mean? Like a deadlock breaker, like someone who gets kills in 4v4s, 3v3s, and 2v2s, and they're like valued not as much as an opening kill that gets a 5v4, but maybe similar. Because I think somewhat like a stat like that might be a way to reward players like Magus, because it does feel like it's the tight rounds, the important rounds. So yeah, there's obviously ways to do it. I'm not going to pretend it's completely perfect, but I think based on our methodology and based on the stats that HLTV currently can give us, and the amount of time we put in, I don't think we could have done a different list, really. I think it's hard to stress just how long and how stringent everyone involved in it is. Like, the way Peter works is honestly crazy. It's actually crazy, because there'll be times where I'm like, okay, we sorted that, let's move on. And we'll spend another 15 minutes just checking, like, everything. There's like, is there an argument? If there's a placement people disagree with, it's because they're disagreeing with the criteria and the methodology, not us missing something. And that's fine. Like it's, at the end of the day, the top 20 is here to provoke discussion. It's not the fucking gospel. It's fine. It's a statistical thing, but
yeah, all
our
right,
opinion,
Monopoly, man. It is the gospel.
it's not the gospel.
No, I'm taking the piss.
You're allowed to disagree with it. I'm fine with people disagreeing with it.
I've
but
told you
the
I
people that
disagree
disagree
with
with
the
it because
methodology.
they fucking spent 3 minutes on the year-long rating list and put Frozen sick for, like, fuck yourself. I don't care.
But this is the thing, though. Like, I've got no issue with people who disagree with it as long as they understand they disagree with the methodology and they're not lowest common denominator fuckheads who have just, like, sort by yearly rating and gone, fucking hell, this Kscerato geese is good. Like,
Yeah, like, you can tell who reads the reasonings when they disagree with you, and a lot of people have disagreed this year, but they're not really disagreeing with the placement. They're disagreeing with the criteria, and that is completely fine. Like, but this is the way we've always done it, and I think if we completely depart from that, it'd be even more of a culture shock to people than it is already.
yeah, no, that's almost certain. And like I said, I disagree with certain elements of the methodology, but I understand where I disagree with it isn't exactly the easiest thing to fix. And I believe that if it was fixable, you guys would do it. Like,
Yeah, 100%. Like, we're going to be looking at that. Of course we are. We're going to be pushing it, but it's difficult, man. It's difficult. I'm not the type of person with the fucking, like, coding knowledge to be able to just wake up tomorrow and make AI round win probability that is better than leaf rating. Like, we're not there. Because we need to do it based off logs and not demos, and it's infinitely complicated for infinite reasons. But we're trying. That's what I'd say, is we're trying. We are going to try and have access to better resources for next year, because this is so important. Like, top 20 is HLTV. Like, it's the biggest thing we ever do. It's going to kill my December for the rest of the, like, if I work here forever, like, it's going to kill my December forever. But it is important, and I wouldn't change any of that. I wouldn't change any of how many things I've missed this last month. I wouldn't. But yeah, we're going to try and improve it. But I just still look back on this year's list and think it's overall fine. Like, I think you can move people up or down a few places or whatever, but like, I do read the comments. I am that deranged. I do read it, and Reddit was a cesspit this year of people
after
like,
he reads
fucking,
the comments, he runs a bath and cries in the bath while sat down with a beer in his hand. Sometimes, if it's really bad,
Bath
he
beer.
sits down in the shower with a beer. It's really bad.
Oh yeah, I've never sat down in the shower. You've got it wrong. But point is, I'm still proud of it. I'm still proud of the work we put into it. It's still cool to be part of it. Like, I'm not the main decision maker. Like, Peter and Striker often agree because they've known how it works for longer. Like, I'm often the one that's like, is there not a way?
Shut up and
Is there not a way for Megs to be higher? Like look at his CT rating on all these maps compared to all the other people who plays his spots, and they're like, we don't look at that. Sorry.
And suddenly,
It's like, okay, fine.
you've just been server muted. You just sat
No,
there.
it's not like that. Like, it's every placement we have there is a consensus. There is, like, under our methodology, this is the thing we have to do. Like, we don't move on until we all agree, at least somewhat, on it. Like, this is not me saying that I completely disagree with what we've put out there, because
I do find it. I will
say,
say, I do find it really funny though that obviously you're known for making graphics about, like, map positions and shit like that, and you have spreadsheets about map positions, and for some reason when it gets to the top 20, you just can't make a graphic and be like, oh, this is why, by the way. You know, because it adds a nameplate, I guess. Like, you can't do that. Like, personally, I think you should be able to. If it even a fraction helps what we said about roles, personally, I think you should be able to.
Yeah, there's an argument for that, but
because I think
that's
you've
a
done
huge
enough.
change to the list, and it changes everything. Because
Well, I think
if we
you've
start
done
taking
enough
into
work.
account Megas, we start taking into account AWPers, and then it's
But I think
you have to put a number on everything, and it's too hard.
Yeah, of course it is, and you'd be looking at it in November as well. But personally, I think you've done enough work into looking at what spots are valued higher or lower in terms of difficulty and this type of stuff that actually, they have the fucking means to do it now. Like, they don't look at it because they didn't have the means in the past and now they do. So maybe that's one of them where, even if it's something you do as a little side project around like Cologne or something, wherever the midpoint is, and it's like, if the top 20 was now, how would it look based on how I'd do it? And then you can present it to them and be like, oh, this would be different, or like, you play around with it as a little thing in the background now for 2023, and it's one of them. I'm sure you've considered it because you're a little freak who enjoys working more than you enjoy sleeping and eating and many other things normal humans enjoy. But
not that bad. But
you are. But yeah, I think though, that is a good place for us to leave it. It can be better, but maybe not with the stats you have. Maybe certain things aren't looked at, and maybe that's just okay. Because at the end of the day, it is an objective list, but there is or it's not an objective list, but it's as close to a subjective as you
what
can
it is.
get.
It's subjective criteria and methodology, and it's an objective list based on that. It's as close to objective as you can ever be.
It's as close.
Calling it an objective list is still wrong, but we're trying. We are trying.
Like, the criteria is always going to be subjective, but based on that, it is objective, and that is therefore as close as you're going to get. And that, at the end of the day, isn't a problem. The problem comes with subjectivity, and there's always going to be a problem in that. So, with that, does anyone of the two people still watching this have an issue with anyone on the at HLTV? Do you hate someone at No. Do you have issue with anybody's placements? Do you think Frozen should be higher? Stavn should be 10 times lower? Actually, not in the top 20. Or Magisk or Blameth should be higher? Blameth? Device. Blameth's in the right place, probably. Other than that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Next week we'll talk about Bleed, because they're new. They're fun.
Are we? Okay. You see what happened today?
That, yeah, exactly. So we're going to talk about whether they can ever be successful. Hint, it's no.
Back to OG bashing, let's go.
But I think South Animo Mackenzie, he's been Harry HLTV Defender Richards, and everything
That's
HLTV...
why they pay me the medium bucks.
Yeah, well, everything that HLTV does can be done by AI. Richard Lewis can't. Smiley face. And we'll catch you in the next one, where I'm going to be fucking vile for an hour of your lives. Bye!